Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Passing Time with Craig. As always, I'm your host, Craig McFarland, and today I'm joined by Samantha Ketsa, the Dance Series Curator for Ignite Festival of Emerging Artists. Sam, thanks for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm super excited to talk about the Ignite Festival and everything, but I wanted to start, I did some research about you. You've been dancing since you were like 4?
Yeah, I started like just doing classes as a little kid. I'm originally from Edmonton, and then went up through kind of like the scene, growing up and going to high school in Edmonton. And then I came and moved down to Calgary 6 years ago now, and did the dance program at UC, and I've been here ever since.
That's awesome. Yeah, you got a BFA in dance from U of C. So what was it about dance that, a lot of little kids take dance at like 4 years old, they do that, but it's kind of like, all right, move on to the next thing. What was it about dance for you that has made you gone this long and continued with it as a passion and a career?
Good question. I mean, it's funny, when I was really, really little, my ambition in life was to be the prime minister. So I kind of did like a reverse engineer of what other people, what normal people do. And my career goals became less realistic and more frivolous. I don't know. But I don't know, I've always had an interest in integrate in like a creative practice of some sort. And especially now, like in the past, like since I've finished my degree and have started to kind of pave a path for myself, my work has really kind of run the gamut of performing and choreographing and creating and doing administrative work and community engagement, and kind of like I've really found, or I'm starting to find, I should say, it's still obviously a work in progress, but like a niche where I can connect and integrate all of my like interests and my like values and social justice causes, and interests in like safe spaces and create and the ethics of creative practice. That's super interesting and important to me, and that's kind of where I'm sitting right now, and that's what's really appealed to me about having a career in the arts, is being able to like pave your own path, and if there isn't a job for you, you can create it for yourself. Whether it's funded or not is a whole other question, but
It's true. It's not necessarily the most well funded right away. Might take some struggles, but what's great about the art industry is that it's not a cookie cutter. It's not a list of this is how it works. You can kind of do, and you've got passions and desires of things you want to mix together, so you can do that together. You can blend it together.
exactly. That's, I think, especially where the arts sit right now. Like nobody's coming out of school and jumping straight into a company and dancing in a company or acting, under one house for your whole life, and then you work your way up the ranks of one employer, and then you die. There's a very like entrepreneurial component, I think, to thriving and working in the arts right now. And that's also something that like appeals to me, is being like taking on leadership positions and like innovating and things like that. So yeah.
Well, yeah. Speaking of which, you are also the co-creative director of Untold Physical Theater. So how did that come about? Why? What? I guess we're talking a little bit about that. That you're like, I wanted to do certain stuff.
Exactly. Oh, totally. So Untold Physical Theater is only a few months old officially, but back in, I want to say 2016, I started making work with a colleague of mine that I met through the university, Emily Sunderland. She's a playwright and a director and an actor and a musical theater person and a voice teacher and a dramaturg and does everything. And so I was like, I want to do everything too. So we've kind of been, and also had a very like, I think, a sense that there was something about the way that rehearsals are run, and like the ethics and like the like the feminism of in creative process. There was something that's missing, and that we had something to say about it in process and also in performance. So through sort of that initial courtship, I guess, created a project called Just Girly Things. It's kind of been our little baby since then. And we presented Just Girly Things at the Ignite Festival back in 2017. And then toured it, I say loosely, up to Edmonton for Next Fest in 2018. And right now, Just Girly Things and Untold are in mentorship with Downstage Theater Stage It program for their Shake Up Festival, which was supposed to happen last week and the week before, but of course the universe had other plans, so we're part of the season for 2021. And we work on other projects, and in sort of this, in response to like the pandemic, we created an online forum for work in progress sharing called Creative Distancing, that is just like a forum for feedback and discussion. So that's kind of where Untold sits and has come out of, is just a desire for us to like create work that speaks to us. And I think the biggest part of having any sort of like social justice fuel behind anything you do is being able to like put it into practice. So that's where a lot of what Untold and what our research really comes down to, is like, what are we doing in the room, and like what does it actually mean to create a safe space, and what, how are we taking care of our actors and our dancers, and not just a like, oh, we have insurance in case you break a leg way, but in a like in a post-trauma way, in an intersectionally feminist, anti-colonial, anti-racist way.
Which is so relevant with everything going on.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we could go back years to like just the Me Too movement, but everything going on right now with Black Lives Matter, it's so important that people get to share their stories, and the key to that is the people behind the scenes need to have different voices of not just cisgender straight white males, like. And so is it been a long time coming in the dance community that there needs to be more voices behind the scenes as well?
I don't know. How do I say this? I think sometimes, to be honest, Craig, sometimes it feels like what Emily and I do and what I do, because I also work for like other organizations locally, and like the work of my peers and things like that. Sometimes it feels like a drop in the ocean, because there's such a deep clinging, especially in dance, I think, to tradition and to like the old way of working and the hierarchy and the like, and that kind of things. But so I think it definitely is a long time coming, this like critical lens and this focus more on not necessarily like we're working and creating a project and we refer to ourselves as collaborators, and like deconstructing necessarily like the democracy of a creative process, but this idea of agency of everybody who's involved in the process. And I don't think there are lots of people or choreographers who will still work in the way of they just come into the room and they'll demonstrate the material and the dancers have to pick it up and go up on stage. But I think that's a work that's or that's a mode of working that's kind of going to be a way of the past, just because we're realizing that like everyone's body has a different set of knowledge and a different experience, and there's so much more to draw on in terms of our somatic experiences and our kinesthetic empathy, to bring into physical performance. So it's not just like, I kicked my leg, that's great, we applaud and we go home,
Yeah. Well, I gotta say, and I don't know if you feel this way, but I feel like people often forget or don't think that dance is such a powerful storytelling thing. Like we always think of, music, and we think of movies, and written word, but the powerful of like dance can be so impactful, but people overlook that, I think.
Absolutely. I think I was actually chatting with a friend of mine who goes to school in Holland, and she said that the biggest thing in terms of like the sort of North American way that we interpret dance versus like the European way that we like, not even like as artists, but like as an audience demographic, is how much people cling to narrative versus letting kind of like things that are more abstract, images, feeling something visceral and ephemeral that you can't define, um, how like digestible that is. And I think there's place for everything, but certainly like in the sort of ecosystem of North American and Canadian performance, like theater and music, because there's words and and our brains are trained through like TV and movie and the music we hear on the radio. We're trained, and country music, God help it. We're trained to look for a linear narrative that has a beginning,
Yeah.
middle, and end, and takes you through a story, and like where you sit in like the position of it. But you're exactly right. There's so much that can be said, I think, with the body, and so like there like so much that can resonate with you, just by being like intuitive and open enough to let like someone's physicality like speak to you, maybe in a way that you don't fully understand when you get out of the
Yeah.
theater or for like days afterwards. But there's so much. That's exactly it. It's things you can't even quite describe it, and I think that's what is particularly beautiful to me about dance.
So, okay, so you were the Dance Series Curator for this Ignite Festival of Emerging Artists. For people who don't understand what a dance curator, or really a curator, anything, explain to people what that means.
Well, it can mean a lot of different things depending on the context of the festival or of the programming. But basically, with Ignite, I'm involved as a curator in the selection process. So we put out a call at the beginning of the year for submissions, and the applicants self-identified what series or like which of all of the series they wanted to be considered for. So then after that intake happened, I got to review and go through sort of an interview process with some of the applicants, and then ended up selecting what came down to 3 projects to support for this outer space digital version of Ignite. And so then my role beyond the selection process has been to be like the liaison and the conduit between our admin and like producing staff at Ignite and then the artists themselves, to also be like, as a fellow emerging artist, a resource for them in the community, and to also select and connect the artists with mentors and outside eyes, which for me is the most important part of the Ignite Festival. It's the most important resource that I think the festival gives the artists, and I think that any emerging artist program gives their candidates is connections to the wider community. So this year in the dance series, I've selected a piece called A Practical Guide to Serenity by Reese Wilson. And she's being mentored by a dear friend of mine, Catherine Semchuk, who's actually based in Toronto, but has all kinds of experience as an interpreter and as a choreographer. And so because Reese is choreographing, filming, performing, editing, doing, like, it's very much her art baby, I was like, you would really benefit from that match. Maren Bjorndal is a second artist in the festival. She's created a short film called Bypass, with her colleague Elizabeth Burney, and she's being mentored by Linnea Swan, who is a really nationally recognized and established dance and film artist, and just has a wealth of experience to share. And then the third project is Cindy Ansah and Stephanie Jerkova in collaboration with Daniel Zephyr, who is a musician. They're creating a work called Renew, and they're being mentored by Taylor Ritchie and Simon McLeod. And what really appealed to me about this, about Renew, was their interdisciplinary collaboration, or their interest in creating in an interdisciplinary like dialogue between dance and music, but also in wanting to like investigate what that dialogue between dancers and musicians is in process, not just in like how they intersect in performance. So that's kind of the breakdown of the dance series too, but I think that's the most important part of my job right now, and overall as a curator, has been to like support the artists as needed and to connect them to the especially because we're emerging artists and you're just getting into the field, just starting out, making connections that could potentially support you later on down the road, or reveal something new about your practice that you might want to research in the future. So that's something I'm feeling really proud of right now.
Well, it's awesome, and I keep having this discussion, like I've had this several times over the past like week and a half, about how important it is for creative people to support other creative people. Like, it's not a competition. If we support each other, it just helps all of us. So I love that that's what Ignite is really about, is giving these support systems to each other.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. That's kind of the thing that we've been trying to stress across each of the series, is that there's not a level of competition. It's really about cultivating a community, and making sure that you're tuning in. And if we were in the live scenario, the goal would be to be going to see other people, your peers' works, because peers, if you can count on one demographic of people to show up to your work, especially as a younger artist, it's your peers, it's your friends, it's your grandma in the back who does not know what your weird art is about, but she's there because she loves you. So that's really the other heart of the festival, is like encouraging peer support and like peer connection.
So when you heard that Ignite was going to be like, we're not letting this stop us, we're just going to go online, how did you feel about that? Were you excited? Were you nervous about how to do it online?
Oh, absolutely. And I think we, as like the dance series, kind of clenched immediately, and we're like, well, how are you going to, like, there's so much about dance performance live that it's the energetic and the there's a level that is lost if I was to stand in a theater space and just live stream to you my dance piece. And like, I was so concerned about initially like the technological leaps and bounds that would have to be taken and all these kinds of like practical things. But then if you pivot, and what I had encouraged the artists to do is to really pivot your project to let the medium of live stream or the medium of film support the concept or the research that you're trying to do, and don't just try to recreate what you would have done live in the theater space, because you're not going to get it. There is no possible way to recreate the exact experience that you intended your audience to have live, on Zoom or filming. There's a lot of work, especially in the like emerging dance community recently, that's been like smartphone dance on film and smartphone cinematography. And it's like, well, what does that, what are the larger political and like cultural implications of the medium that you're using and the way that you're editing it, and like the accessibility that your work now has, because it's not contained to this one ephemeral moment in time in the theater. And not necessarily seeing that as a bad thing, but certainly at first I was like, what the fuck are you? But like, it was fine.
Well, yeah, and I mean, it's different when you're doing like a full live like recording of something, but there's always that thought as you're watching, you're like, well, this is pre-recorded. How many times did they do a take of that, right? And whereas when you're
Exactly.
watching it in a theater, you're like, oh, well, they're doing it right in front of me.
Exactly. Exactly. There's levels of like of the I'm trying to like phrase this right. It's not even like how impressive something it is, but like there's a level of like the intellectual components as of like the intellectual considerations as a choreographer, and then the the physicality that's being explored, that like you can't necessarily, if I'm running in a circle on a film, you're just going to see me running, you're not going to feel me making a wind tunnel in the
Yeah,
theater space. So
yeah,
it's totally different, but it has it has its pros and cons. And I think
yeah.
the field of dance film as it is like is has so much innovation and so much potential for growth out of this time. So yeah, that's kind of where I've been approaching the series going digital from, is
Yeah.
that
Well, I also have to mention, I was reading up on all the different pieces and performances that are part of the Ignite Festival, and what I absolutely love about it, not just the emerging artists and a way for them to get supportive, but the stories. There's so many different stories, going back to speaking about different voices, but there's a lot of topics that they talk about, including like mental health and sexuality. And I think it's great that Ignite does that. What does that mean for you to be part of something like that?
I think it's huge. I mean, specific to the dance series, Reese's work, A Practical Guide to Serenity, is rooted in her lived experience as someone with an anxiety disorder, and what it comes from, like the day-to-day nuance of being human, and then how does that manifest physically. And I think there's so much to be revealed, especially by, I think at different stages in your career there are different like barriers to research and to our imaginations. But certainly I feel like there's so much power in like the wisdom of young people, and their and knowing and like researching and speaking on like their own truths and their lived experiences. And what I really enjoy is that the the sort of running theme underneath a lot of the programming of the festival this year is like the nuance of our human experience, and it all comes from a really personal place for the artists. And I think that's another thing that, like, backtracking a little bit to Untold Physical Theater, that like a core component of Emily and I's ethos and my individual like approach to work is that I don't think you can truthfully and fully tell a story that's not your own. So it's really important to me to be supporting artists who are making observations and delving into research creatively that is a response to the context that they're creating in, their time, their circumstances. And I think that's
Yeah.
super powerful.
Oh, totally. I think it's great, and I'm so excited for this, and I think it's awesome that it is online because it can give a bit more opportunity for people to see these stories. So it's June 10th to the 13th online, stagetheater.com, and it's by donations, whatever people can pay, right?
Exactly. That's exactly right. That's the beauty of the online component to it, is that we really had a conversation on the admin end about what accessibility means to the festival at this time. And I think that'll really open it up for more people to, get a taste of what's happening at Ignite this year.
Yeah, and so they can go on there. The schedule's already up, so people can go check it out. But if they're specifically interested in the dance stuff, Renew is Saturday at 6:40 p.m. Bypass is Friday at 7:55 p.m. And A Practical Guide to Serenity is Friday at 8:40. So, I mean, but there's plenty of shows going on and a wide variety, which is going to be super awesome. Before we go, I need to know, as a dancer, when you go to like a wedding, do you dance the whole night, or are you like, I'm taking it off?
I think I start, this is like any social function or just like going out, back when we
Yeah,
went
yeah.
out, is I try to like
Yeah.
play it cool and not, but I think there's a threshold, and that has to do with like, is there an open bar and has Toxic by Britney Spears played, and then it's on. At least that's my
True.
experience. I don't know if that's the universal dancer response, but no, I think, yeah, that's the other thing is I take like relatives a little bit to task. They're like, oh, well, you just show me your moves and I'll stand here. I'm like, no, I'm not going to be here like judging your technique tonight. I'm going to no.
No, that's fair. Yeah, I wouldn't ask you to critique my dancing, because it is. There's no rhythm here.
No. There is no
basically
judgment.
Yeah, my moves are basically just the moves from Backstreet Boys music videos. That's pretty much it.
See, now I'm so curious to see if there will be like a resurgence of people who are less, I don't know, I think like into like the late 90s, like mid-aughts, babies just missed the music video, like the MTV era. So they didn't quite get the, like, you stand in front of your TV and learn all of Bye 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 by NSYNC. But I think because of TikTok, I'm curious if there will be this whole new surgence of people who like whip the Renegade and these dances out, the Savage dance out in public, like if it's playing from a bar on Stephen Ave or something. I don't know. We'll see.
It will be very interesting to see if dancing is people dancing more is what comes from this. This will be very interesting, and not the result I thought of.
Because I know there's people who've been sitting at home just learning like the TikTok dances, and I'm like, well, are you gonna bust a move? At a family barbecue? Like, what's gonna happen?
Yeah. I hope so. I think people need to. Well, I thank you so much for coming on and speaking with me today. I really enjoyed that. And so everybody, make sure to check out the Ignite Festival of Emerging Artists, June 10th to 13th at stagetheater.com for more information and for the schedule, all by donations. And make sure to check out Untold Physical Theater to find out more, and be in touch with her if you're thinking of doing some dancing. Thank you so much, Sam, for being here today.
Thank you, Craig. Thank you so much.
Of course, and make sure to follow us on Facebook, guys, at Passing Time with Craig. Follow us on Instagram at PTWCraig, or check out our new website, passingtimewithcraig.com, and we'll chat soon. Thank you.